All right, let's talk about the 18th century. Now, you might think of new machines and big ideas, but it was also a time of massive, seismic shifts in how we tell stories. Seriously, forget everything you think you know about old, dusty books, because this is where the kinds of stories we still love today really got their start. And this one idea from the poet Alexander Pope, it just perfectly captures the spirit of the age. Literature was about to turn the camera away from gods and monsters and point it inward, right at the complex, messy, and totally fascinating world of real human beings. This was basically the seed of a revolutionary new art form.
So, how did it all happen? In this explainer, we're going to break down how the 18th century didn't just invent the modern novel as we know it, but also sparked this new, deeply emotional kind of poetry that totally paved the way for the Romantic era. You see, for centuries, the popular stories were these huge epics and romances, tales of chivalry, magic, and heroes who were way larger than life. They were grand, they were fantastical, and they were mostly about the lives of the super elite. But that was all about to change. Storytelling was making a huge pivot, from the fantastical to the familiar, from the palace right into the parlor. Okay, so let's get into our first must-know topic, the birth of the novel itself. And I mean, this wasn't just a new kind of book, it was a completely new way of looking at the world.
The key word here, the one that changes absolutely everything, is realism. For the very first time, a major literary form was all about portraying life as it was actually lived, with believable characters who had relatable problems. I mean, imagine going from stories about dragon-slaying knights to a story about a guy just trying to survive on an island. It was a massive, radical departure from that old, fanciful romance genre.
And there were three pioneers who really led this charge. First up, you've got Daniel Defoe. His book, Robinson Crusoe, reads like this gritty, almost journalistic account of survival. Then you have Samuel Richardson with Pamela, who took readers deep, deep inside his characters' heads to explore their psychology and moral choices. And finally, there was Henry Fielding, who used his novel Tom Jones to hold up this big, satirical mirror to society, painting a huge comedic picture of English life. Okay, quick question for you. Which of those three pioneers used a whole series of letters, an entire novel told through their mail, to get deep into his character's psychology? That would be Samuel Richardson. He was the one who pioneered what we call the epistolary novel, and that format made the story feel incredibly personal and immediate. So you have to ask the question, why then? What was going on that created this perfect storm for the novel to just explode in the 18th century? Well, it really was a perfect storm. For one, the Industrial Revolution meant more people had more leisure time. This created a brand new growing middle class that was not only more literate, but, and this is key, they wanted to read stories about people like them, not about kings and knights. And to top it all off, thanks to big advances in the printing press, books were suddenly cheap and easy to get for a mass audience. Here's a really simple way to lock that in your head. Just remember the letters MIP. The novel's new audience was a middle-class, increasingly literate public. This was the brand new, hungry readership that authors were finally writing for. Now that MIP, that middle-class, increasingly literate public, they weren't just reading novels. Nope, their tastes were changing all over the place. Which brings us to our second must-know topic, the huge shift that was happening in poetry at the exact same time. We call this stuff transitional poetry, and you should think of it as the essential bridge between two completely different worlds. On one side, you have the strict, formal, reason-obsessed Neoclassical era, and on the other, you've got the emotional, individualistic, nature-worshipping Romantic age that was just on the horizon. This poetry was the link. And here is how it all connects back. Remember how we said the novel was all about realism? Well, this new poetry was doing something very similar. It was starting to turn away from these big, abstract ideas and instead find real beauty in nature, in personal feelings, and in the quiet dignity of ordinary, everyday rural life. And this chart just lays out the change in mindset perfectly. Poetry was shifting its focus away from celebrating reason, social order, and city life. Instead, it started to dig into the power of emotion, the importance of the individual, and the incredible beauty you could find in nature in simple, rustic settings. It was a total 180. A perfect example of this is Thomas Gray's famous Elegy. Now, it still has the formal structure of the old style, but its themes are all pointing to the future. It's this powerful meditation on death, on memory, and on the anonymous, uncelebrated lives of common people buried in a country graveyard. I mean, that was a pretty radical new subject for a poem. Okay, that was a lot to take in. Before we wrap this up, let's do a quick memory check to make sure we've got the most important points from this explainer locked in. Okay, first, the 18th century novel was a revolution, and it was built on one word, realism, all for a brand new middle-class audience. Second, its rise was powered by social and tech changes, which you can remember with MIP, the middle class, increasingly literate public. And third, transitional poetry was that crucial bridge, moving us from the age of reason to the age of emotion by focusing on nature and the individual. So, I'll leave you with this to think about. From the reality TV we watch to the deeply personal books and movies we love, how are our modern stories still being shaped by that fundamental decision made way back in the 18th century to turn the camera away from the epic and onto the individual? Thanks for watching.